You're in the Live Ops Landscape track sponsored by Microsoft. We've been running since 2 o'clock here at UK time. We've had a number of sessions there. And we're going to bring in now our final panel. So this is going to take us up to the end of the afternoon, or perhaps it's the morning if you're dialing in from the US. We've got people from 75 countries joining us, which is amazing. This panel is about why Live Ops is not a dirty word. And I'm going to hand over, I think, to, we have our moderator, Joseph Kim. Hi, Joseph, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Thanks.
Oh, perfect. And I can hear you too. I see some, we've got another panel, people joining, some familiar faces. Jamie, hi. Long time no see. Marc, that's great. You've got Josh Nilson, Javier Barnes, Scott Humphries, Marc Williamson, Jamie Cason, and Marc Val, Marc Val from Microsoft, who opened our session this afternoon. So welcome back. I'm going to duck out. Joseph, take it away. And if you have any questions for these folks, do drop them into your Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom window. Joseph, take them as they come up as you like. It's your panel to run, or I can call in at the end and help you create those. Up to you. I'll hand over to you guys.
All right, great. Well, everybody, welcome to this panel. We're really excited to talk about best practices in live ops, and we've got a pretty, big group here. We've got a lot of, very impressive folks in speaking today, and so I thought we could actually start, just given the limited amount of time, with a really brief intro from each of the speakers. And just to start with myself, Joe Kim had a long history in mobile gaming. Led the development of a game called King of Avalon, then went into publishing, and now I'm trying to start a new game studio, trying to close our financing right now. So that's what I'm working on. And then maybe going over to you, Jamie.
Hi guys, Jamie Cason. I'm head of external developer relations at Miniclip. I've been working in the organization for nearly 10 years. Most of that time I served as an executive producer on our web, which by its very nature entailed a reasonable degree of live operations. Recently, I've been working in our publishing operation, and I'm very fortunate to be working on what we hope is going to turn into a hit game for us, a game called Ultimate Golf.
Marc Williamson.
Hi, I'm Marc Williamson, CEO of Tank Games. I took over about 2.5 years ago after being there for 8 years of head of production. Tag is 50 people in Dundee. A developer works with a whole bunch of people on new product and live products.
Okay. Javier, AKA JB.
Yeah, I'm currently working as indie developer, but for 10 years I've been lead game designer for Monster Legends, and before that I was a game systems designer for Asphalt 8, Despicable Me Minion Rush, and several other live op intensive games.
Okay, Marc Val.
Hi, I'm Marc Val, part of the Microsoft Azure Play Fam. I've been in the online industry for 20 years, and the last 10 years pretty much touring most of the studios around the world talking about live ops, and still talking about it today. So I'm looking forward to it.
And the Josh Nilson.
Hey everyone, I'm Josh. I'm from Eastside Games. We started doing live ops and monthly events back in Pot Farm on the good old Facebook platform, doing monthly content, and now we have a studio in Vancouver that we make live ops narrative idle games like Trailer Park Boys, It's Always Sunny, Dragging Up, and our latest game Archer, and also published games like The Goldbergs back to the 80s.
Great. And ending strong with Scott.
Thanks, Joseph. Hey, I'm the head of product development for Amber. Amber is a game development and studio services agency. We have offices around the world. We offer a variety of services, top publishers in the game industry like full development, co-development, QA, and live operations. Prior to coming to Amber, I worked at a couple of big publishers like Jamdat, if you guys remember that company from back in the day, EA, Disney, creating AAA mobile games based on some of their biggest brands.
All right, great. And so jumping right into the session, I thought we could start with trying to get a really big takeaway for our audience. So wanted to start with what is, for you guys, the biggest lesson you've learned operating a real world live game. And maybe we can start again with you, Jamie.
Yeah, okay. I suppose, given we all have hopefully a reasonable degree of understanding what we're talking about with live ops, As it's live, and in any good theatrical activity or improvisation, I think it's always good to have a plan B, something you can switch to if things aren't going as you'd expected. So usually this is the case where maybe you're going to try something new and you're looking at the metrics and your revenues aren't tracking. In our case, what we do is we sort of compare what they're doing today as an hourly trend versus what they did at the same time last week. And where we see that they're falling behind by a sort of a margin which we're not comfortable with, we might switch in another offer. You know, the guys just aren't picking up. In the case of golf, for instance, we release every week a new golf ball, which is a very fancy piece of 3D art with some sort of characterization to it, and that's the main driver of sales at the moment. If we see one that's really not really kind of doing it with the guys, we'll usually have something else to swap in. So that can either be for a sort of sales related reason or for a technical reason. We had this recently on golf. We were trying to upgrade Unity, which broke our art pipeline sort of 24 hours before we wanted to release a new ball. Luckily, and I can't say that this was necessarily planned, but it was a sort of an artifact of our old art pipeline. We had a ball in the client which could be released via the server, which just happened to be baked into the client. So it was an unreleased ball. So we sort of saved our kind of big weekly release offer by, as it turned out, luckily. And I thank the guys at the developer, Hip Games, for if not having the foresight, then just sort of loading the client up with this piece of content early doors, having that to sort of save the day. So plan B.
Oops, got it. Great. Thanks, Jamie. And maybe over to you, Marc Williamson.
Yeah, so I guess it's probably not going to be much of a shock to the audience, but when we first started doing live products back in 2010, I think it might have been, the fact that actually the hard work starts at launch. You know, technology isn't standing still, your player base isn't standing still. There's always going to be something going wrong. That's just the nature of products, that there is something that's going to go wrong. So I think the biggest lesson that the studio took away from those early days is that the hard work, it starts when you're live, and there's so much to do after that point. It's you know, I came from a background of launching box products and not having to think about it too much after that, and that was a big change for the team and the mindset within TAG at the time.
Javier?
Well, for me, my advice or my lesson would be that you need to build a framework that allows you to apply Lean methodology to your live ops. Do not think each live op as its one-shot thing, but rather set up a process that allows you to measure the performance of each live op and add iterative changes to set up a path of constant improvement. I have an example for Monster Legends. We had this type of event. It's called the Maze. By playing, the players collect event currency, and then they can spend it on moving the monsters towards the end of the labyrinth. And when they reach the end, they collect the monsters. Of course, this type of event, it monetizes at the end, which is when players realize that they are going to fall short on collecting some of the rewards. And we see that, and that kind of means that the rest of the event is not necessarily very exciting, right? What we did, for example, was adding some time-limited objectives. So some monsters that start really close to the end, but they are available only during specific moments of the entire event. And that kind of gave the players additional incentive to start spending earlier, and also increase the fun, because it had more strategy. They could go for the time-limited path, or they could save the resources for the broader event. So for me, my advice would be build up a structure where you measure the performance of your live ops, and you progressively iterate to keep on making it look fresh and unique to your players, but also keep on improving its performance.
Okay, Marc Val?
Yeah, test before shipping, number one. Apply agile 2 weeks iteration. Test again, and target a small subset of players first, like 5-10%, then grow the subset the day after. Make sure that you support your cohorts, that you can track them. Make sure that you have tools that are uptime 99% up, and also make sure that your team is aligned and that you have a common goal that you want to get to and track. So I'll keep it short. Yeah.
Marc, when you say test, do you mean more from a QA perspective, like having like?
Yeah, that's correct. Well, you have to test out in QA, but you have to test out before QA, which means that you have to test out with your team, with your friends, if something is actually relevant to do. You often spend a lot of time in things that are not necessarily good at all, that it's just not fun. And so I'm really talking about testing the feature, the game mechanic, and if it's the meta game at the end, even more. And then obviously test out that the features actually work. So test harness process and all these things needs to be put in place before going live. And then after it's live, then test again, because then you might have some tracking that is missing. You might have, you know, some other parts that need digital inputs. And if they are not there, then you have to make sure. Otherwise, if you start scaling, then you can have a bunch of erroneous information that you cannot capitalize on to accelerate after.
Great. Josh?
This is all great information. I think we could end the talk here, take questions, we're done. I think this is what all developers need to hear. My big one is for live ops, just make sure that you have the people on your team that really get what live ops is and what that entails. It's probably not, for the most part, going to be entirely the same people that build the game, although sometimes it can. It's just the mindset switch. What Marc said was really good, that you know, now the real work starts. And you know, a good example of that is platforms are always changing. A whole bunch of developers yesterday got iOS 14 that released, and we have to go to the team and say, whatever you're working on for the sprint, you might have to wait because we have to switch this, make sure we're compliant in this. And that's just going to be what mobile development is like. So if you have developers that don't really enjoy working in that environment, then make sure you're having that discussion on hiring or moving to team, that it's going to be a different mindset. It's a mindset of, I use the analogy of, it's always a busy restaurant. You have to be as prepped as possible to have a good shift in a busy restaurant, because if you're not, it can be very difficult to kind of get through that.
Great. And Scott?
Yeah, I think live ops is a complicated methodology and process to get your head around. But for me, I'm a big fan of KISS, you know, keep it simple, stupid. So for me, it's always trying to like frame it around what you need to get. And it's like, give your players stuff that brings them back to your game every day. And if you can sort of think about that and give them things that they want to come back to, you're going to increase conversion, you're going to reduce churn, and it's all about learning from your players live to continue that process and rinse and repeat into different cohorts, your elder gamers, implementing, analyzing, and optimizing. And I would say, like, in relation to that, the thing that I've learned pretty recently, I would say in probably the past year of doing this, or I've been doing this for probably about 10 years now, is that the implementing, analyzing, and optimizing happens even before your game is released. And sort of piggybacking on what Marc Val was saying, like getting in front of your consumer as early as possible, especially if you have an original IP, testing your theme in the market, market testing players, using services like StoreMaven to put up some fake app store ads to see if like your game can resonate with the audiences is super key, because there's tons of awesome games that release every month, and they don't fail because the team isn't great at live ops or the team isn't great at optimizing. It's because there isn't that aspirational connection of the source material to the audience. And I think creating that relationship with your audience early is super important these days.
Got it. And so just moving to the next topic, and I think for a lot of our audience who might be kind of in the trenches live operating a game, when you guys look at some of the tools in your tool belt, what are specific practices, tools, methodologies, capabilities? Like if you could name one thing to help drive the biggest increase in performance, what would you say that thing is that some of our audience should be focusing on? Starting with you, Jamie.
I would call out segmentation as a practice. I would say that the general idea of live ops, the kind of the theme of it really is to always be driving towards improvements in content and offers on a per user level. Now, you know, you may not get to that sort of holy grail, but if you have that mindset, then, you know, even if you're in the early days of a title or even your experience of live operations, it can be very broad. So, you know, naturally you might think, well, and you see this a lot, guys are coming into the game, what's the first offer I'm going to make? You know, so you usually see the starter pack as something that happens. You know, that's a solid thing you can do. Also, then you might start to think, oh, actually, guys have been playing the game a bit. I'm noticing that some guys are getting on a losing streak. Great, they're in pain. I can make an offer to them. But you start to segment your user base, you know, based on where they are in the game, what you see in terms of the analytics you can draw from their behaviors. But obviously you can start to get more sophisticated, and this is the progression. You start to get more sophisticated. Maybe your tools start to enable you to support that. Like, is there something about players on a certain tier? Do they consume less content than you'd expect? Or, for instance, you can then start to target buyers. They have bought in the past, but they haven't made a purchase in the last 7 days. They're still coming to the game, but maybe they're ready for something. And that should then be your guide to creating content, events and offers that are best targeted at those specific users segments. But the drive, you know, to sort of misquote Glenn Ross, rather than always be closing, you know, always be segmenting.
Great answer, Jamie. Marc Williamson?
Yeah, I think with Tag's background, assisting other studios in their live products or building and launching them themselves, that none of them are ever our own. So I have to be careful about any particular things that I might actually say. So I guess one of the things I would always suggest is that make your team's life easier, whether that's by good tooling or whatever. Like, you want your designers, you want your team to be able to put out content as quickly as possible. You don't need, like, the nature of free-to-play products often means that they're built quickly, and some of this good practice and good tooling is left behind. And you want to enable your team to build things quickly, experiment, put out the best events they possibly can, because building an event takes them 15 minutes instead of a week. You know, that's the type of stuff you want to enable your team to put out content as quickly as possible. So that's going to drive players into your game. It's going to keep your team happy, and it's going to reduce some of the frustrations that live operations just has inherently with SDKs changing and this, that, and the other. Make your developers' jobs easier.
Great. Javier?
Yeah, iterating a little bit on what Marc Williamson said, the best way to increase the performance and the profitability of your live ops is to put your designers to start thinking on how to do that. You don't want to have your designers doing stuff that a machine could do, because they're gonna get frustrated. So here's a process that I've run in some of my teams, and for me it worked. Pretty simple. List all your live ops, break them down on tasks, the tasks that are required to set up all your recurrent live ops, and estimate how much of each task, how much time does each of these tasks take. And then you target first the tasks that take the most time, because those are probably the ones that are going to be easier to improve. And then you start evaluating. So maybe some of them don't add a lot of value for your users, so you can remove them. Other may be repetitive, and therefore you can automatize them. Like, for example, Jamie said about segment stuff. So maybe if you're, for the same event, you are presenting several balancings for players of different levels, instead of having your designer manually setting up each of the parameters for each of these segmentations, maybe what you can do is just set up a formula that does it. And maybe if your live op takes, I don't know, 100 parameters to set up, maybe you can reduce it to only have 10 parameters and everything else being calculated from there. Or maybe you can review and eliminate the steps that are more book prone, because in my experience, one of the things that live ops have is that they require a lot of testing because there are a lot of steps that are book prone. And essentially you keep on improving them over and over until they take less time to set up. And eventually, hopefully, you will be able to put your GDs to work on making them more profitable and more fun, and not that much doing stuff that machines could do.
Got it. Marc Val?
Well, there's a lot of good things that got said already. Well, growth per se depends on which level you are looking for. If it's growth in money, growth in users, there's a huge difference between the two, which cannot be going to turn to milk the users or not. But that said, the number one factor that developers should look at is literally take care of their community. Many of them just leave them on the side. They don't do anything on Facebook. They don't reply to the comments. They don't reply to support. They don't reply to reviews. Well, do the opposite of that, reply to everything. And also localize. So once you have a community team in place, then you can localize in the 11 languages, which covers about 75% of all of the internet. And that way, obviously, you can have more reach. 50% of the payers online only pay in their own languages. So that is a big number. So if you're only in English or only another language, this is obviously not the case for growth. So there's really small nuggets that you can get into before even getting into more complicated things. You just have to think about reach in general, what marketing does for you, and that should help you to succeed.
Great. Josh?
It's focused on retention. So I think a lot of devs just focus on sometimes on the monetization right away when they launch. And that's extremely important because we are businesses, but you just have to really spend a lot of time in focusing on retention. I think another big thing that's changed in games, especially over the last year, is just being how long companies are now in whatever we're calling it these days. It used to be called soft launch, but platforms don't really like that too much, but limited launch through really getting to know your players. And, you know, we saw with industry leaders like Supercell doing it for, I think it was almost a year, over a year, for just really growing your communities in those games and launching early, focusing on retention, and then adding those monetization elements later, I think is the way most developers are going now.
And Josh, when you talk about focusing on retention, is there any specific like methodology or approach that you guys take, or is it more about thinking about your cadence of live events, or like like for our audience, when they are trying to think about retention for their game, what would you recommend?
The method we use is a full-fledged panic and chaos to try to figure out why retention isn't working. So far, that's done okay over my almost 20-year career, but I wouldn't suggest that. But what I would suggest for working on retention is work on what is the early retention, improve that, and then iterate. So for example, there's another great talk earlier in the week that was talking about if you have your Fatui out and it's working and it's fine, don't obsess about changing the Fatui. Instead, look at really simple things like loading times. Anytime you can eliminate the loading times, that's good. Any early bugs, any early crashes, really look at your market segmentation of your devices that you have and make sure that it's working on all those devices. And if it's not, then do simple things like maybe don't, if you know it's not working on a device, don't market to that device and go from there. And then from there, slowly start building stuff. But I think what we used to do as a developer, and we probably still do it, but a lot of developers that we work with are focusing on sort of the longer tail picture, which you definitely should be thinking about that, but you got to be thinking about install on day one. You're bouncing almost everyone off your pages and then install. So your marketing team is going to take care of those pages on getting people to click install. And then if they have to wait too long for the install, you're bouncing the majority of your users there.
Great. Scott?
Yeah, I can definitely relate to the hair on fire release and live ops mentality. And I think the way we try to approach that is because when we do live ops, it's typically with a partner. As an agency, we'll be working closely with publishers on their games and partnering with them on the releases. So process is super important to us. And I think, setting up a good process, and for us at Amber, it's an agile approach to game dev. And especially in live ops, that's super important when you're trying to get stuff out rapidly. 1 week sprints on our games that are in live ops are pretty common. And sometimes even little tiny sub sprints within that to get out events and features that need to happen to bring people back. So I would say the agile process is super important for us when we're looking at live ops. I would say one thing that's also commonly overlooked when people are talking about live ops is because oftentimes live ops is thought about optimizing your KPIs and monetizing and driving engagement and things like that, which is super important. But I think what's often missed is operating costs, and being able to lower your operating costs and have a more of an effective way to release your content either through automation or cost savings is going to increase your bottom line as well. So I think that's an important way that we look at it, especially when providing value to our publishers, is that like not only are we obviously looking to optimize the game, but how can we optimize our operational processes and costs in order to add additional value there.
Great. And so just rolling on to our last question before we go to Q&A, I wanted to talk about the infrastructure for live ops, and whether it's the data infrastructure or some of the capabilities. There's often a discussion at a lot of studios about, what are the parts that you keep internal versus what do you use off the shelf or third-party solutions for? And so I wanted to basically ask you kind of a two-part question. One, how do you guys approach that internal versus external decision in terms of infrastructure? And then if there was one component that you felt was really important to actually build in-house, what would that component be? And again, starting with you, Jamie, if you could start, that would be great.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, at Miniclip, we've been somewhat privileged to have been around a while and kind of grow our experience with the emergence of free-to-play games, and alongside that, our product and technology teams have elected broadly to create their own systems, and obviously we've sort of had the ability to do that over time. Working with external developers, our systems aren't sort of productized, and they aren't available to external developers. So I've been very lucky to be a user of PlayFab with certain external developers, and to sort of come at it from another end. So I guess, from your point of view as a developer, obviously it's going to depend, but I would imagine if you aren't already doing it and you're starting out, you're probably going to want to go with one of the platforms like PlayFab or Chili Connect. I think, Scott, have you got something at Amber as well?
Yeah, we love PlayFab. We use it a ton, part of the Microsoft game stack now, I guess. And then we do have our own custom stuff that we'll need to add in occasion, because not all solutions will give you what you need. But I think I agree with you 100%. Like if you can get it off the rack, it's a lot less to invest in infrastructure by having a bunch of DevOps and server guys build stuff from scratch.
The only caution I would say, if I could speak for my technology team, they're always very wary of being dependent on anyone else's support. So, they generally take a very skeptical view that anyone else's tech can scale like their tech. And they sort of they would much rather not be beholden to any external entity when it comes to the heat of the live operation, especially, in a global launch, when you're scaling very rapidly. And we've definitely been sort of caught out somewhat by that. So I think oftentimes, out of the box platforms are definitely great to start. Definitely allow you to focus on other more important things for your product. But you just need to have a mind on how you're going to scale. Ideally, you factor in buying the best possible support from that platform that you can afford, so you can get a named individual on the phone if things start to heat up to the point of falling over.
All right, and Jamie, in terms of the one capability you would build in-house, would that be for you? You talked about segmentation. Would that be the thing that you guys build internally?
Yeah, I mean, effectively, that's what we've done in terms of analytics. We run our own proprietary stack, and that's a sort of product that's available to all of our internal guys. And through our history, we've used other analytics systems sometimes, and in the case of some of the external guys, I'm able to have sort of best of both worlds. So we instrument, say, Mixpanel and also our internal stuff, because I think it is also useful to be able to triangulate and compare. So in that case, we do that with Mixpanel, our own internal thing, and also we use Adjust, the attribution platform for UA, which gives us, comparisons across things like retention. So, it just gives us a way of triangulating. Yes, these signals are accurate. Building analytics is certainly something that we're sort of quite precious about, and that not only enables us to analyze our economy and look at the behavior of players, but it then is the trigger for certain systems like push notifications, and it facilitates A/B testing and things like that. So in our case, that's the way it's turned out, somewhat organically, but we like it that way.
Okay, great. Marc Williamson.
Yeah, so I guess back in 2010, 2011, when we started doing our first live product, there wasn't really much available, so we had to build our own. I don't think many of these services came around for another 3 or 4 years, or at least matured for that amount of time. So we had to build our own. There was no other way about it. So for a number of years, we continued to invest in engineers and our technology, and building upon it for every game that we were building and needed support. And then a few years ago, we decided to actually try and productize that and offer that out to other people. We got a few customers on board, and that became a product called Chili Connect, which was spun out of Tag Games and then became its own entity. It was later acquired by Unity about a year ago now. But if I look back, was it the right thing to do? Yeah, obviously it was a great result. Obviously, that our tool was being purchased by Unity, but there was a split focus in the studio around like the technology stack and producing the games. And I would say that you're probably not going to be building some features in your product that isn't supported by some off-the-shelf solution right now. And you have to weigh up whether you want to employ engineers to build this stuff. Being in the position we are now, I would say that we would do the majority of us. We would purchase a solution most of the time now. Looking back at the hard work it took us to get to that stage. We've seen kind of both sides of it, building it from scratch and then productizing it and working with other people to use our system. I think Tag Games and Chili Connect are their own separate things now. And Tag Games wouldn't go about building our own tech from scratch to support our games.
Got it. JB?
Well, in my opinion, like most of my my career, I've been working with in-house tools, and whenever I've worked with external tools, they end up getting bought and then they shut down. So, so I think if you're a big company and you have a wide roster of games that are going to be able to share the service, I would recommend you to create an in-house tool for that. The problem is if you are a medium company or even small company and you only have like maybe 1 or 2 games, maybe you don't want to have some of your developers doing something that is not necessarily the actual game. If you're on that situation, I would definitively recommend to use different services. I haven't worked with it directly, but PlayFab seems really, really cool. And I think it's owned by Microsoft actually, so no chance of it getting bought. And then there are other tools that are on development like userwise.io that I've been checking, and it looks quite interesting. Both of these tools allow you to do some cool stuff, set up stuff on the spot, manage the different balancings to different audiences. So I don't know, Google it, and it really depends on what's the size of your company.
Got it. Marc, Val, I can guess your answer, but please continue.
Well, thank you all for using PlayFab. Today we crossed recently more than 1 billion unique monthly active users across the pool of games, and so that means it's 4,000 plus live games. Many of the major studios and publishers use PlayFab today, and we have indies joining every day. That's why we build the platform. There's hundreds of engineers behind it. We have a roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years. There's a lot to do. We're going to continue to support it, obviously. We're also looking at open sourcing parts of it so that anyone can extend it the way they want. And while we still contribute to the source and to the code, and iterating on it so that studios can extend it in an easier way. But by any means, and we've heard it a few times now, is that once you've built a live game operation platform, you don't want to build another one. It's just it's really hard. And that's why we're there. And we're going to continue to support the gaming community and beyond, and bring more features. And as we transition to the next phase of mobile that is coming, which is a lot closer to our highs, and then it's going to bring even more component to the equation.
Josh?
Yeah, it's a really hard question. I think the simple answer is build your game, spend your resources building your game. So whatever gets you quicker to market, to do it that way. And then if you do have a successful game, get the proper tools that you need, either implement or continue to build in-house. It's might be a shocker, or might be dropping this the first time a Pocket Gamer connects, but sometimes games don't make money and you're going to have to sunset them. I know people might not know that fact, but a lot of them you have to throw in the garbage. And if you spend all your time building this deep infrastructure that goes across all your games, it might be obsolete. So we've done a combination of both. So build to your strengths. I would say the easiest win is get one of the services that takes care of backend. And then if you want to build all the other stuff internally, do that. But you can use analytics that are built from your game engine or platform. You can use some of their A/B testing tools and stuff like that, or you can buy something off the shelf like Swerve. But a lot of the services that are already mentioned, we use Beamable for ours for the back end, can get you up and running. And if you get a game that needs to scale and get huge, there's many companies that can help you out, or you can solve that problem when you need to.
All right, Scott, take us home.
Yeah, happy to. So as a service organization, Amber is very rarely using our own tech to build upon. A lot of times when we work with our published partners, they'll already have their preferred system. So one of our advantages is that we're flexible and that we can adapt to a lot of different platforms. We already mentioned PlayFlab is probably a preferred one for us just because of how robust the feature set is. But then what we found as well, and I think this is important to think about, and I think this is where Josh was also going, is that even if you go off the rack, you're probably going to find for your games that you're going to need some features that are specific to what you're trying to do. And at Amber, we've created our own CMS toolset, which stands for Content Management System. And that basically allows us to do things like, deliver business intelligence predictions, advanced player management, events, social features, virtual store merchandising and sales with someone that isn't an engineer. So like a product manager can go into a tool set and basically be like, bink, here's your event, I'm going to optimize, or here's your sale or your offer, I'm going to optimize. And we found that pretty important to be able to have a system that we can sort of spread across our portfolio of games and offer as a service to our partners. So I would say that's probably a pretty key piece of tech that you're going to need. So you're not needing to do those updates in clients, that you're basically able to do it from a web tool set online.
Got it. And so that concludes the, the kind of paired part. So we can go now into Q&A, and I see 3 open questions. And the first actually is for you, Josh. Josh, Trailer Park Boys is a huge success in terms of long-term retention and implementing IP into idle games, having people playing since launch till now. What are the expectations around Archer Dunger Phone since you've changed some mechanics around it, and what were the drivers for that change?
That's the other thing I wanted to, it dovetails nicely into what Scott just said, is the biggest shift is making games that last 3, 5, 7 years. And another point kind of related to that is devs that can't handle that can look at services like Amber and those other services that can continue your game on as well. So one of the big things that we're focused on that isn't really a tech thing, but it's more of a community thing, is just looking at maintaining that community for years. We kept Pot Farm up for almost 10 years, and then we didn't really have a really solid transition plan on what do you do after 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. One of the biggest things that we're really looking at is the core driver is content and things to do, because people will play daily and will want content. So in a lot of ways, we're now becoming a little more closely aligned to like streaming, or in the olden days, folks, there's things called TV stations that had to put stuff on cable. We're kind of like cable providers. You'd have to have a weekly show. So you have to have weekly events, and we're going to do some really cool stuff in Archer. And for Trailer Park Boys fans, we have some really cool stuff to iterate. And so you can take years to do it, and your fans will be with you along those ways.
All right, and maybe we have time for one last question. What's your biggest struggle day to day in a live ops role? Just opening that up to anyone who wants to answer that question, but maybe starting with you, Marc Williamson.
Right. So I guess the inherent nature of live games and their need to stay live for multiple years. You're going to launch a product with a handful of SDKs. You're going to have potentially a team that's delivering. You might split your team in half. You have half your team delivering roadmap features, but then you've got another part of your team dealing with the stuff, the unknown that gets thrown at you. So, so iOS 14 being released, a SDK that you've had integrated being deprecated, a user finding out an exploit in the product and announcing it to the world. Those types of unknowns that you just can't plan for, that keep the whole team on their toes. Like it's exciting, you can come in the morning and, the day is not the same. But at some point the struggle is wanting to just sit back and know what you're doing the next day. Because I think with live operations, you can't really guarantee what at least part of your team needs to deal with.
All right, any other thoughts on this question?
Well, for me, the most challenging thing is that you have to manage. Live ops can eat your entire day and can eat your entire mind. And sometimes it's easy to fall into cycles where you're only thinking on the next live op you're gonna do next week, and you're not thinking maybe 1 year in the future. You're not thinking how to bring your game in the top 50, top grossing, or in the top 20. So I think, at least to me, one of the biggest challenges is how to manage this necessity of, or the need of the game to have a layer of strategy and the day-to-day. And I really don't have the answer, actually. If any of you have a good answer on that. But I find myself struggling because I'm a very hands-on developer. So a lot of times it's like, how can I manage changing maybe some elements of the core versus thinking of making the next live op really great?
All right. So I think we are just out of time now. I want to thank all of our panelists for the great insights and for participating in the panel. And then I don't know how to turn it over back
It's okay.
over. So.
Don't worry,
Okay,
I'm here. I'm lurking in the background, always just slightly out of view, ready to leap in like a ninja. Thank you very much, guys. What a great panel! Really in depth. You know, it feels like you guys could have talked for a lot longer, but you've run exactly the time. I really appreciate it, answering all those questions. Thank you very much. So Joseph, what a great, so well moderated. Thank you very much. Joseph, Kim, Josh, Javier, Scott, Mark, Jamie, and Mark. Again, thank you very much. Round of applause. You'll have to imagine that coming from all the audience. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do this again live next year, but really appreciate that. Really great way to end this afternoon. This afternoon's content here on the Live Ops Landscape track. So thank you, folks. And I should say to our audience here, if you have more questions for these experts, maybe seek them out in Meet to Match or on the Discord channel, or I know many of them are on Twitter or whatever. Go and find them. So thanks again, guys. I appreciate it.